All right, everybody, welcome back to Success on the Spectrum, the podcast. You've got Lyndsay, Chey, Morgan, and Brittany as per usual. Also, as per usual, we are not medical, psychological, or spiritual professionals. Please regard any information following this as such.
I actually do consider myself a spiritual professional, but the rest of those are true.
There you go. Please don't come after us for anything that we say right now because we're learning at the same time all of you are. We are doing this together. So welcome to our I think week 8 now. We did just have a bye week, so welcome back, ladies. Life has been lifing. Let's do support system, shall we? Speaking of, life has been lifing.
So you call a friend, call a mentor, call somebody that's going to talk some sense into you and remind you who the hell you are, because you're going to have times where you forget it, but it's about like who you're surrounding yourself with. So if you're not surrounding yourself with people that are reminding you of that, that's a problem. Putting yourself in rooms where people like are like how Chey just said, like they're coming and saying like, where do we find more of her? How do we duplicate her? How do we make sure she thrives? That's the type of people you want to be around, not people that are like, you're dreaming too big. You might, I don't think you could ever be that good. So you want to make sure that in order to really like, you deserve a seat at the table, but like, how do you remind yourself of that? You have to put yourself in positions and surround yourself with people who are going to remind you of that, because everybody's got it in them. It just has to be pulled out. But I
gotta find those anchors. I love that.
Yeah. And realizing that if somebody is, shitting on your, I don't know if I'm allowed to say shitting, but shitting on your dreams or telling you to dream smaller, or that, those are the wrong people and that they're not going to help you get to that level that you want to be at. But
just have to say, I think by being like, are any normal people doing this job, I think you just met people who aren't like barking and screaming in a morning huddle.
Chest bumping. and what I mean by that too is like, that was my way, like just like what we're talking about right now, like operating on the confidence curve. I wanted to connect with women who were successful in the industry that I wanted to be successful in. It didn't matter what company they were at. It didn't matter where they worked, what they were selling. Who is in this role right now that I want to emulate and be like, and like, not in like, oh, I'm going to use this person to get to the top, but it's like, maybe we can coexist and work together and learn from each other. And like, that's that in itself. Like, I think I learn just as much from brand new reps as I do from people who have been in the industry for, 10 plus years. So, but I think you help each other boost the confidence. But, Britt, what about you? What do you do to operate on the confidence curve?
I actually really loved everything that you guys said. So I just have a couple quick things to add. I know Morgan, like you talked about this a little bit, it got brought up, but I think that rewiring how you think about failure has been a big one for me because I am always operating on a confidence curve. I'm on one right now. I'm super uncomfortable. I don't like how I look on camera. I hate how my voice sounds when I play it back. Like when my husband listens to this podcast, I'm like, can you turn that down? Because I don't want to hear myself. Like the Chicago comes out. It's just, but I feel like what I've been trying to shift my mindset into is learning skill sets along the way and increasing my amount of knowledge, because I think that failure, I've heard way too many like good quotes about the importance of failure, and I personally have received the benefits of just like grinding through it and failing forward too many times to not think that failure itself is valuable. So I feel like what Chey has been saying is like, just show up, just show up. That's honestly my thing. And I'm just like, I kind of hope I learn a lesson out of this. And I stopped really thinking as much about how I show up, just that I show up. And that was a journey for me as well. Cause like I mentioned before, I used to be like a big time flaker. And so that's something that I wanted to mention. But also, something else that kind of came up when I was thinking about this question is that the ego is the part of us that feels insecurity, that feels this self-confidence or, lack of self-confidence, that feels all of these fears. And the ego is our lowest vibrating self. Like if you want to, Freud obviously this is like disputed, but he basically separated to like id, ego, superego. And I just really thought that that was a good way of like separating our many selves. Cause like, you know, with your superego is like your higher consciousness that you're really trying to like become and access and ascend to. And like that version of ourselves doesn't feel self-consciousness, doesn't feel fear. And I have developed this kind of like irrational sense of confidence where like I know I have no idea what I'm doing 99.9% of the time, especially in like building this business or anything else. But I've made so many big moves knowing that I have no idea and just like feeling it and being like, this feels like the right move to make, you know? And like when you feel it, you got to send it. So like the times that I've moved across the country, the times that I've like gotten into new industries, like all those things, I don't know how I'm going to succeed. I just know there is no plan B. Like I didn't have a plan B when I started knocking doors and selling solar. All I heard was that, you know, you basically have an autonomous schedule that you are paid for your effort more so than, you know, some other predetermined amount, and that you have the flexibility and you're incentivized for personal development basically. And I was like, I need to do that. I didn't have like a, well, if this doesn't work out, I'm just like, I'm going to figure this out because there's an equation here. And the equation is time with a multiple of effort equals outcome. I can't control the time it'll take, but I know that I'm going to do the work. And I'm like, I know I'm not dumb, you
And
know?
that'll beat experience every time.
Yeah, and same thing with this. Like Steve sometimes will be like, "Oh, I just, you know, I want to make sure that, you know, we're doing good and all this stuff." And like he has a different mindset to where like he very much wants to succeed, but he's still like a little like what if, what if, what if? I don't have any what ifs. And I think that's probably a little bit delusional, but literally yeah, I don't know. I think that fear is the most important part, and ego is the part I try not to listen to because it's the lowest vibrating one. So those are my two additions.
I know
Um,
you already gave us some Freuds, but you're gonna data dump on us too today,
I
right?
am, but it's not going to be Freud related, I
Ah,
promise.
So actually
So,
on that, one of the things that none of us have actually talked about yet so far, and that I think you're about to touch on, is the actual physiology of burnout, how we handle it, how we can best support it, etc. Because
mhm.
you're talking about supplements today, right?
Yeah, so I kind of was gonna like, I've always been a little bit of a supplement nerd. I have a background in personal training and I worked at GNC for a long time, and it's also just something that I was like super passionate about. And I love the idea of like multivitamins and supplements and herbal things, and I listen to a lot of podcasts about it. And you know, I think that proper and specific supplementation is really important, but it was really difficult for me to be able to concisely talk about things that I think are helpful because we're talking about so many broad ranges. So I'll just talk a little bit about how I structure my own supplement regimen and like what I think about and the intention that I put behind it. And then if anybody wants to hit me up and nerd out about supplements, I'm happy to do that. You know, I'm obviously not a doctor. Um, so one of the things that I really think is important to know is that the physiological relationship between like supplementable things and the actual energy slash motivation that we feel. Because I think a lot of success or really life in general is, especially for neurodivergence, it's not so much about the problem isn't really ambition. The problem is regulation. And I think Morgan, you touched on regulation, and that's so right. Like you have to just figure out how to physiologically regulate yourself. And even in sales, they talk about this, like don't get too high from the highs or too low from the lows. So how can you give yourself the best possible chance throughout the day, throughout the week, throughout the month to have a consistent physiological foundation to where you know how you're going to feel based on what you're doing. Like Chey, you're like, I traveled, I didn't eat a healthy meal. Like you knew already going into this morning, you knew what you would feel like because you have that mind body relationship. You're like, if this, then this. And that comes back to just being self aware. But I think the most important things, and I used to call this, like with my personal training clients, I used to call this the 4 pillars to the house of gains. It's like your little foundation. So hydration, I obviously is really important. And hydration, not all hydration is created equal. Like I used to have a RO filter in my house. I didn't know at the time that it took out all of the helpful like hydration minerals and things that our body needs. And so obviously that is really clean filtered water, but if you do get most of your water from an RO filter, just know that you're going to have to add back in some kind of like minerals. So there's a brand called Trace Minerals that's really, really, really good for that. The taste is kind of finicky, like you have to get the amount right, but the product itself is really good. There's, electrolyte packets. I really like LMNT. So there's a lot of things that you can add back in. And just obviously like don't drink tap water, please. If you've got like a
Be like
spring
that.
nearby, go ahead and fill it up, I guess. But please don't drink tap water. But just and also there's a lot of free resources where you can like test the water or figure out what kind of contaminants or like the quality of the water that you're getting. But I think that your quality of hydration is super important, and amount. I try to drink a gallon of water a day. I know that sounds like a lot for some people, but if you're the type of person like my husband was before we met, he literally drank like Mountain Dew and Diet Coke and like energy drinks. If you don't like the taste of water, like change the taste, but drink some water, please. The second thing is multivitamins, also super important. Even if you have a super clean diet, I very much believe that like the nutrients in our soils have been depleted. The sourcing of a lot of our ingredients, whether it's whole foods or not, is questionable. So it will behoove you to just add a good general multivitamin. I don't have any endorsements or sponsorships. The brands that I personally like, I really like Pure Encapsulations is a brand that I use for a lot of different kinds of vitamins. I heard about that on the Andrew Huberman podcast. I use Andrew Huberman as a trusted resource. Some other of the resources are Dr. Rhonda Patrick. So we can nerd out about that if you guys want to hit me up. But Pure Encapsulations makes a really good multivitamin that I use, and then also like AG1. I use that too, and that leads into my next pillar, which is like probiotic / gut support. The reason that I like AG1 is because it has multivitamin and nutrition, but also has gut support. And our dopamine, our immunity, a lot of our hormonal regulation occurs in our digestive system, and there is a literal link between our brain and our digestive system.
Second
So
brain.
that's why, yeah. So that's why you feel, you can feel sluggish or have brain fog. So if you can take care of your gut, reducing inflammation, adding nutrients to support it, then I think that will be really important as well. So that's the third pillar. And then the fourth, I think, is inflammation mitigation. Inflammation is really good in certain ways. Acute inflammation is really good. You experience it after you work out. It's required in your body. It is a signal for things. You don't want to be just like getting rid of it and taking ibuprofen because you think it's a bad thing. It's not a bad thing. It's a required process in your body. And a lot of times it is necessary for your body to recover, to heal, etc. That being said, chronic inflammation is one of the leading causes of illness, and chronic inflammation absolutely is going to make you sluggish, unmotivated, more susceptible to neurodivergent symptoms and things like that. So some things that I love to use for inflammation are like turmeric, black pepper, ginger,
Kangen water.
Huh?
Kangen water.
9.5 baby all day. But also omega-3 fish oil. And you can take like a one fish oil. The amounts I think are really important too. The EPA component of fish oil or omega-3 specifically, is more like anti-inflammatory. That's where you're going to get that benefit. The DHA component is more for like cognitive support. So I don't think that it's a bad thing to take a lot of fish oil, but also it is a natural blood thinner. So just keep that in mind if you are on any other kind of blood thinning medications or have any kind of like coagulation disorders or anything like that. But fish oil is like my Windex. Like with my big fat Greek wedding, when he's like, put some Windex on it, I'm like, have you taken fish oil about it? So
You could have been a doctor.
yeah.
You would have been one of the ones that broke the mold and was like, let's go at it from a healthy way before we go at it from a chemical way.
Yeah,
wouldn't
but
have-
I'm not, yeah, I didn't want to work 80-hour weeks. Like,
Go to school for
or
10 years.
yeah. But the only other thing I want to touch on is rest and recovery. Anything that you can do to support restful sleep and recovery, physical recovery, like branched chain amino acids, adequate amounts of protein, all those things are super important. And then also sleep support. I know a lot of us either have trouble falling asleep, trouble staying asleep, unrestful sleep. So I don't want to go on too much longer, but I'm super encourage you to get in touch with me because this is something I'm passionate about. It's something I love talking about. I can tell you about all the things that have helped me and all the podcasts I've listened to. So if you are looking for any kind of like specific recommendations or support, I would love to chat. But so hopefully I was able to do that quick.
I've picked up multiple new things just
Me
from
too.
conversations with Brittany over the last few years. So she's my trusted resource.
So
All
true.
right.
I don't know anything. I just work here.
So that leads us into sharing our spectrum. And I think this does tie into, I don't know, I guess a lot of what we've been talking about today, but how we are unlearning the hustle culture. Because that's something that we've all come up in. Being in the entrepreneurial realm, being in the neurodivergent, where a lot of us look for fast-paced work positions, no matter what realm you're in. I think it's important that we touch on how we deal with so much burnout. So if you are in a W-2'd environment, I pulled up a little bit of data on this. If you're in a W-2'd environment, it is likely in today's day and age that 38% of your neurotypical employees experience some sort of burnout during their working years from their job, like in any given profession. It's a minimum of 50% for neurodivergence in the same position. And most of that's due to overstimulation and issues with dopamine balance levels, all of our normal regular side effects that can be, or symptoms that can be heightened when we are working under somebody else's expectations on time, etc. Right. So and we're all going to share kind of what we are doing, have done, are planning to do to unlearn that. Mine is very simple. You'll hear all the time that balance is not possible for people that are building a business or moms that are working, or it's not possible. You just got to struggle and get through it. And I'm calling bullshit right now. My life runs on balance, and the balance that my real life runs on is, do I feel okay about the way that today went to where I want to wake up and get out of bed and do all of the things again tomorrow? And that is my balance. And if I'm getting to a point where I don't want to get up and get out of bed and do all the things, because I have a lot of things, I know that I'm off balance. And so some of the things that I've done to mitigate that, I do Mountaintop Mondays as often as I can, because Mondays for me are actually slower days. Social media runs on the weekends. So Mountaintop Mondays are important to me. I get outside, I get grounded, I get my feet in the dirt. Obviously spending time with my kids is fantastic because that does alleviate its own sense of balance for me. But the biggest thing, honestly, is I think that I have started implementing, even into my smallest SOPs for my day, ways to alleviate stress. So in my morning routine, midday stuff, like I constantly have a little thing here or there that's like triggering the dopamine and relieving some of the anxiety and, checking off checklists, etc. So that is how I'm unlearning the hustle culture, is I'm actually relearning how to live in it better.
Yeah. Something that I wrote down when I was thinking about this is understanding what non-profitable activities fulfill you. And so what are things that we can do that have nothing, that are not going to make us a single dollar, that we truly enjoy? And that is the connectivity to your soul. And while I do believe that neurodivergents especially need to be in a career path that they are passionate about And I think that is such a beautiful thing that I will support always. I also think that we are the most complex living thing on the planet. And we have this one little blip of a life that we get to be blessed with a subconscious and conscious mind that, you know, guides us to joy, pain, excitement. We get to feel things that no other breathing organism on this planet gets to feel. And so the purpose of life is to be fulfilled, to love, and to enjoy your life. And making money is super fun. Working in a career path that you are passionate about is super fun, but it cannot be everything. You know, there has to be times when you go connect with the raw, naked version that just your freaking soul cares so much more about, like living life and being happy and being at peace than it does than hustling and making more money and bringing more people into your business and getting this award or doing this or hitting that milestone. These things are important at a specific schedule, Monday through Friday, whatever your time is. There has to be parts of your life that have nothing to do with profitability and everything to do with lighting your heart and soul on fire. And so whatever that is, some people like to, you know, go on a yacht with their friends. Some people it's as simple as getting on the hammock and coloring in your coloring book for a couple hours. Some people it's planting plants. Some people it's kayaking or hiking or whatever. But you have to reconnect with the human version of yourself in order to alleviate yourself from the hustle culture. It infuriates me. It actually, no, it doesn't. It makes me really fucking sad when I see people who are like, if you aren't doing this 7 days a week and you're not eat, breathing, selling, sales your business. I'm like, that's great. And I bet you have more money in your bank account than I do, but your life fucking sucks.
Yeah.
You do not enjoy your fucking life. Mm-hmm. And like those guys who think that masculinity is, I didn't see my wife or my kid for the first 2 years, but now my wife has a $200,000 wedding ring and we live in a mansion. And I'm like, yeah, but you missed the first 2 years of your child's life and you weren't there for your wife. You think that's manly? That's not manly. That's the least manly thing I've ever fucking heard in my life. A real man's going to show up for his family. A real man is going to know how to delegate his business properly so that he has time to spend with his family and he has to spend fulfilling his heart and soul so that he can show up for himself and for his family and for his business. I think the hustle culture is a crock of shit.
Yeah.
And I drank that Kool-Aid for 2 years. I was more depressed than I even could realize. I didn't even realize how fucking sad and depressed and unfulfilled I was because I just kept hustling through it. And I woke up one day and I was like, I don't take care of myself. I eat out. I gained 40 pounds. I hate the relationship I'm in. I have all this money and I fucking hate my life and I have no idea who I am anymore. I literally go to dinner with my friends. I couldn't talk about anything else but a fucking alarm system. No, that is not the purpose of your life. So I just went off on that because I hate hustle culture. Hustle culture made me meet a version of myself that I did not enjoy. And she didn't enjoy her life, and that just makes me sad. And the way that we promote it, a lot of people promote it. It's just like, that's not right.
It's the new 9 to 5.
Yeah. I actually really like what you said about like finding something that brings out your passion for something that doesn't make you money. So I was the Peace Corps. I did the United States Peace Corps, and I spent a really long period of my life volunteering, making $300 a month was my pay. So really knowing, like, when people come to me and they try to say like, oh, you can do this and you can grow this whole team, and if you hustle your butt off, you're going to get this. It for a second, I might've teetered to like, oh, I think that is something I could do or I could want. But in reality, like when you've lived somewhat of a slow life and you know that like you can be as productive in a slow pace as you can in a fast pace, it's really like it is a huge turnoff. And like the industry has it wrong. Like, of course, they're attracting a certain type of person, but they're a churn and burn. This isn't about longevity. This is about how do we make money the quickest that we can for myself in those kinds of situations. So really, like, when you are passionate about something and you are like love what you do, it doesn't feel like a hustle. Like I can attest to that. Like I feel like I do something, same with Lyndsay, same with all of you. We kind of are always kind of doing something maybe work related at times, but you turn it off when it's time to be present with your friends and your family. Like you have to
Shut that door.
yeah, you have to turn it off because
In theory.
yeah, you really don't, you don't get that chance to like revive yourself and fill your cup back up and come back as that full person for yourself and everybody else if you're like constantly like, but man, like that slow life, like the rest of the world lives that way. Like the majority of the rest of the world, there, of course, there's hustle culture everywhere, but there's a way that you can learn a work-life balance that I don't think want you to know. So, but it's almost when you're coming out of the hustle culture, you're like, I always want to say the word traumatized because I don't know what
Well,
else.
it's almost like you just got out of a cult.
I literally
How it feels. You're just like,
all the beginning of last year, I felt traumatized. I know Chey was probably traumatized. But like it was really hard to reintegrate into any other thing for so long because I was literally terrified of ever being put in that situation again. But you pop someone off all the way to burnout and then you expect them to want to come back and work with you. Like it's not, again, it's not about longevity. It's just like the churn and burn. So finding something like Love Mountain Mondays with Lyndsay, but like you got to do your non-negotiables. Like your hustle is not going to be any better because you skipped your nature day or you skipped your family time, or you're not going to make more money because of it either.
And I've always said, like, and John and I have talked about this a lot, and we are in alignment with this, is what a lot of people think, like in a marriage or like having kids and stuff, is that like the kids come first. And I could not disagree more. I come first and John puts himself first so that we can show up best in when we get married, our marriage. And then when our marriage is thriving, we show up really, really well for our children. Mm-hmm. If I feel like crap about myself, my marriage is going to struggle. If my marriage struggles, my kids are going to feel that, and it's not going to be a good situation for them. Mm-hmm. And so I think the same too is like when you're leading teams, well, God, Chey doesn't really take care of herself. She's just like constantly working and she's always exhausted, and she snapped on me yesterday. I don't think she's really eaten a lot this week. Your team can feel that. Yeah. The people around you can feel that you're not taking care of yourself. And it's like, I see these people, I'm like, dude, this is not healthy. I don't look up to people who are just burying themselves in productivity, in productivity. And yeah. I like, it's really, you're just being busy so you feel good about yourself. You know what I mean? And I'm like, that's not healthy. And I don't want to look up to a CEO or a boss or a mentor who doesn't take time for themselves. I'm like,
well, it's always like, don't take advice from people that you wouldn't trade lives with.
Yeah. Yep.
You know, and that was one of the things that I learned early on in my entrepreneurship journey, which really wasn't that long ago. It was like 2020 probably for me. But it was very much like, don't just look at like what someone has. You have to look at the life that they're living. And I think that's what's really important. I'll segue real quick into mine. I love what all you guys said. And Chey, there was something that you touched on that I have something written down that was like kind of like a similar vibe, but I wrote down like okay, let me preface this by saying that for a lot of my life, I didn't know what I was like, what I wanted. And so everything I did, I worked really hard, but I got burnt out a lot because I always felt like it wasn't necessarily where I was supposed to be. The first time that I didn't feel that way was when I got into door-to-door in solar, and I didn't have a traumatic experience. I mean, you know, door-to-door is really hard, and like things about any job sometimes suck, but like I love my team. I had a great company. I really like enjoyed the people that I worked with. And so it was a really great experience for me, and it taught me a lot and kind of brought me to where I am today. So I'm nothing but grateful. But there was a lot of that grind culture where like really your value was determined by your production. And I think that the competitive culture of grind and hustle culture, that's kind of the toxic part, because I don't think that it's necessarily like bad to value how hard someone works when it's well placed. It has to be well placed, and it has to be in the right, like there's a time and place for everything, right? So just knowing the time and place for everything. But I think replacing competition with collaboration, that has been one of the ways that I have kind of replaced that like grind hustle mentality, because I feel like a lot of that was like, being at the top of the leaderboard, like there can only be one. You know what I mean? And like now in the business that Steve and I build together, like that's one of the things that I really want to make sure is like an integral foundational part of our culture, and how not just how we run our organization within the company, but how we run our business as we deal with other entrepreneurs, small businesses. Like I love collaboration. I love building bridges. That's something that fulfills me. Even when I'm not the person of value, if I know people that I think would go really well together, that would get along great, that their businesses like somehow, I don't know how, but they fit somehow. Like I love making connections and providing support and introducing people. And I've gotten really lucky over the past couple months that I finally started meeting a lot of like people like that here. So I'm super grateful. Shout out Sam. She was the first domino. But truly, like, replacing competition with collaboration as a mindset, I think, is one of the best ways that you can kind of unravel like the toxic parts of hustle culture, but still like be working hard. The other thing is I am not my grind. I am a celestial being having an earthly experience, and I am here to grow and to learn and to love and be loved and not to acquire.
I love it. I love that.
And that's all I've got to say about that. But I know we're running a little bit long, but does anyone have anything, any nuggets that they want to drop real quick?
Did Lyndsay,
Before
you
we-
didn't share?
What's
Yeah, I
that?
did.
You didn't?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
Lyndsay went
Haven't taught
first.
Mondays, baby.
Well, cool. Well, thank you guys so much for tuning in. I'm sorry we didn't give you any tea last week, but sometimes life be lifing. So thank you for tuning in with us. As always, all we ask is if you're getting any value, if you know someone that would get some value, please like, follow, share, subscribe. Tap the little bell so you get notifications for all of our new content. I encourage you as well to interact with all of us individually. We're all very different, but we all kind of have a lot of similarities. So if one of us resonates with you, if you need a little bit more explanation, or you want more advice or guidance, or want to nerd out about something, hit us up. We are just folks. So thank you guys. Hope you have a great weekend, and much love.
From the folks.
Bye, y'all.
Bye.